My name was Amir. I was a judge in a conservative Texas town, respected for my unwavering adherence to the law and my deep-rooted Islamic faith. To my community, I embodied integrity and discipline, a pillar among my people. But beneath the surface, a storm raged. I felt an emptiness gnawing at my soul, an internal conflict that whispered doubts during my prayers and haunted my dreams with visions I dared not acknowledge. Then, everything changed in an instant. An accident, violent, disorienting, and unforgiving, sent me spiraling into something I had never imagined. For a fleeting moment, I was unshackled from my earthly body, thrust into a realm beyond comprehension, where time ceased to exist and fear unraveled into raw truth. In the depths of that near-death experience, I stood before a figure radiant with light, Jesus himself, calling my name as I trembled in his presence. He didn't speak in riddles, nor did he come to cement my doubts. Instead, he illuminated a cosmic battle I had been oblivious to, exposing a web of deception woven through not only my faith but the very fabric of society. I realized then that I had been entrapped, not in a devotion to God, but in the clutches of a system built on fear, division, and control. I became aware of an unseen war, one that sought to blind and bind souls searching for purpose. As I came back to the world, the weight of my revelation bore down heavily upon me. The surges of joy from my encounter were met by the chilling rejection of my loved ones. My own family labeled me a heretic. I felt a divide grow, an emotive chasm that threatened to swallow me whole. Yet in the depths of my solitude, I began to explore the very essence of the truth I had been graced with. A truth that called to others lost in the shadows, wrestling with their own spiritual awakenings. Today, I am compelled to share my journey, a mission above all else. I've walked this path of doubt and discovery, and now I invite you to join me in shedding the shackles of confusion, because the truth is awakening in our world, and it is time to confront it. Before we dive deeper, I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from right now? What time is it in your corner of the world? Drop a comment below. And if you love Jesus and are hungry for more revelations, subscribe to Truth from Beyond. A transformative journey awaits, and you won't want to miss a single moment. I remember that day vividly, like a snapshot burned into my mind. It was an ordinary Tuesday in a small Texas town, where traditions held tight and change felt like an unwelcome visitor. I was serving as a judge, a position that came with responsibility, respect, and, in my community, a heavy expectation to uphold conservative values. The air was thick with a palpable tension, especially for someone like me, a Muslim navigating the echoes of a predominantly Christian environment. My life had always been a careful balancing act, trying to respect the beliefs of others while holding on to my own. But everything changed the moment I experienced what felt like a spiritual war unfolding right before my eyes. One evening, an unexpected heart attack struck. It was sudden, brutal, and left me gasping for breath. As I lay on that hospital bed, surrounded by bright lights and the sterile scent of antiseptic, I felt a profound pull, as if I was being drawn into another realm. In that moment, I crossed the threshold between life and death. I was enveloped in darkness, but then a light pierced through, a light so bright it seemed to illuminate the very fabric of existence. And there he was, Jesus, standing before me, radiating a presence that shook me to my core. I could feel the love emanating from him, but it was paired with an urgency that made my heart race. In that sacred space, Jesus began to reveal to me truths about the hidden agenda that governs our world. I saw flashes of time, politicians puppeteered by unseen elites, crafting narratives that divide us instead of uniting. I felt the weight of deception hanging heavily over our society, feeding the spiritual war that raged unnoticed by so many. The images of war sparked by greed, leaders driven by ambition rather than compassion, and technological advancements created not for the betterment of humankind, but to tighten the grip of control. It was overwhelming. I realized that this was not just a war for our souls, but a fight against ignorance, a clarion call for awakening that seemed deafening in its intensity. As I listened, I could hear the whispers of humanity, suffering, confusion, and the desperation for truth amidst a sea of lies. Jesus spoke of the awakening that was needed, a transcendence beyond the superficial chaos we live in. "You're being called to share this," he said, and every word resonated deep within me. I understood that this was about more than just my own life. It was a collective call to rise above the divisions that fracture our world. Each revelation felt like a piece of a puzzle that had been missing, connecting the dots between spiritual enlightenment and the grim reality we face daily. But the urgency in his message pierced through the beauty of the encounter. Time is running short and action must be taken. But then, just as quickly as the light enveloped me, the vision began to fade. The hospital room returned, cold and uninviting. I could hear the frantic beeping of machines, surgeons rushing around, panic taking hold. I was thrust back into reality, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been touched by something divine. As I recovered, the weight of that encounter pressed heavily on my heart. I had been given insight into a transformation that is possible, not just for me, but for everyone willing to see beyond the veil of deception that our elites have cast over us. The revelations were seared into my consciousness, emerging in my dreams, urging me to speak out, to challenge the status quo, to spark a conversation that could inspire others to awaken to their own truth. But fear began to creep in. What would my community think? In this town where something as simple as a differing belief could lead to ostracism, how could I share this experience without the fear of retribution? The battle raged within me, mirroring the grand spiritual war Jesus had illuminated. I started to realize that the awakening wasn't just about me proclaiming these truths. It was about confronting the internal struggles that life lays before us all, whether we're ready or not. And I found myself standing at a crossroads. Would I dare to step into that light, or retreat into the shadows where comfort resides? I always prided myself on my integrity. As a judge in a conservative Texas town, I was known for my disciplined approach to the law and my unwavering commitment to justice. But in recent years, a shadow crept into my heart. I found myself staring into the mirror, questioning everything I believed. As a devout Muslim, I maintained my faith with diligence, but there was a growing emptiness within me. It was as if I was caught in a spiritual war that I couldn't quite comprehend. My prayers felt hollow. My understanding of the world seemed confined to a narrow perspective, and my heart ached with discontent. I sensed a conflict between what I was taught and the unrest brewing deep inside me. One fateful night, while driving home from the courthouse, I experienced something that would forever alter the course of my life. A sudden, severe pain gripped my chest. Panic surged through me as I realized I was having a heart attack. In that harrowing moment, as my vision blurred and the darkness threatened to pull me under, I felt an indescribable sensation that something else awaited me. A pull, as though the very fabric of the universe was beckoning me into the unknown. I gasped for air, and in my final moments I crossed the boundary between life and death. In that ethereal state, I found myself amidst a blinding light. It was there I encountered Jesus, a figure of absolute love and compassion. His presence enveloped me, yet somehow conveyed an urgency that shook my very soul. I weighed the heaviness of my doubt against the brilliance of his light. It wasn't merely a vision. It was a revelation. Jesus began to unveil the hidden agenda I had unknowingly been a part of all along. I witnessed scenes of the elite, orchestrating a complex web of deception, manipulating the narrative to foster division among humanity. Wars waged not for righteousness, but as instruments of greed. My heart raced as I witnessed the anguish of countless souls, deceived by the very structures designed to protect them. Each image pierced through my spirit, igniting a desperate need to grasp the truth that lay beyond the surface. As the revelations deepened, the gravity of their implications began to sink in. I understood that the spiritual war isn't confined to any single realm. It permeates politics, society, and even our personal lives. Jesus spoke of an awakening that beckoned those who dared to seek the truth, urging them to step away from the comfortable chains of ignorance. I could feel his hope intertwined with urgency. "Seek the truth," he whispered, and that sentiment echoed deep within me, stirring a longing to comprehend the true nature of the world and my place in it. The spiritual awakening was not just a personal journey. It was an invitation for the collective, a call to arms in the battle against the forces that seek to keep us blind and divided. As I returned to my reality, the intense light faded, replaced by the stark fluorescent bulbs of the hospital room. My heart was still beating, but I was irrevocably changed. The urgency of my experience lingered in the air as I grappled with it. How could I convey what I had seen? The divide in my community seemed to echo the larger chasm in our world. I was left with a mission that felt both daunting and exhilarating. My inner turmoil intensified. Would I muster the courage to share the revelations I had received? The fear of backlash loomed large, but inside I felt a distinct shift, a newfound strength that whispered of the truth waiting to be revealed. Days turned into weeks, and I found myself caught in a whirlwind of thoughts as the memories of that otherworldly encounter haunted my dreams. What I had seen couldn't remain bottled up. I knew I had to act, but how? I felt the weight of countless lives caught in the crossfire of a spiritual war, yearning for the same awakening I had experienced. The stakes felt higher than ever, amid a world teetering on the brink of chaos. It became clear that my struggle was not just personal. It was deeply intertwined with the fate of others. The revelation that I had received was not merely a burden, but a fire in my soul, compelling me to confront the fears and challenges ahead. And as I prepared to step into that light, I understood this was merely the beginning of a much larger journey that awaited me. Every night, the same dreams began to haunt me. It was as if a radiant figure was urging me to confront the doubts that had been gnawing at my soul. I could see him clearly, illuminated, powerful, and full of grace. Each time I closed my eyes, I felt a mix of fear and curiosity, knowing that these dreams were attempts to pull me toward a deeper understanding of my faith. I had always followed the tenets of Islam diligently, but recently, the foundation of my beliefs felt shaky, like sand slipping through my fingers. It wasn't just the questioning within myself. It was as if the universe itself was echoing a greater spiritual war, one that demanded my attention. Something in my heart longed for a truth that led beyond the confines of my religious upbringing. The dreams intensified, becoming more vivid and unsettling. In one, I saw destruction, communities torn apart by division, influenced by an unseen hand. I felt the anguish and despair of people lost amid the chaos that our elite leaders continuously perpetuated, fueled by deception and a hunger for power. I awoke in a cold sweat, my heart racing, the weight of those dreams heavy on my conscience. I wondered if these visions were a message, an invitation to awaken to the realities we often ignore, the hidden agendas of those who manipulate the masses. I couldn't shake the feeling that my nightly encounters were connected to something larger, something divine. One night, after what felt like an eternity battling my doubts, I suddenly found myself in the presence of Jesus. The moment was surreal. His eyes shone with love, yet they held a deep sorrow. He spoke of truth amidst a world steeped in deception. Suddenly, it became clear to me that the very foundation of our society rested on lies. Lies that empower the elite and keep the rest of us living in fear and confusion. "You must seek the truth," he said softly, his voice mingling pain and urgency. I had never felt such a profound weight in his words. I understood that every act of division, every societal rift, was a tool in this spiritual war. It was shocking yet liberating to confront how the fabric of our world is woven with manipulation. As he revealed more to me, visions of wars fueled by greed and the puppet strings pulled by powerful leaders flooded my mind. I could see their hidden strategies to keep the masses blind to the reality of their suffering. I felt the pain of humanity vibrating through my very being, and it ignited a fire of urgency within me. The realization struck me like lightning. Our awakening was not a personal journey but a collective necessity. I understood then that those dreams weren't just cryptic messages, they were warnings. Jesus urged me to awaken to my responsibility not just as a judge, but as someone who might guide others toward this truth. It was staggering to realize the rippling impact one life could have in a world so full of distractions and false narratives. But with that understanding came a terrifying question. How could I confront these truths in my community? Here I was, a Muslim judge in a deeply conservative town, grappling with a vision that challenged the very core of our shared beliefs. My internal conflict intensified. I knew I couldn't remain silent. My soul cried out for action. Yet fear enveloped me. Fear of rejection, fear of backlash, and fear of losing the respect I had painstakingly built over the years. What if sharing this revelation exposed me to the very animosity I had tried so hard to navigate around? But the urgency I felt could not be ignored. The spiritual war raged on outside, and it echoed within me, demanding courage and conviction. Each day grew heavier as I wrestled with the monumental choice before me. I was caught in a web of uncertainty, craving the light that had ignited my spirit but paralyzed by the darkness that whispered doubts into my ear. The motivational dreams hadn't faded. If anything, they escalated. Jesus' message continued to echo in my soul, an invitation to awaken not just myself but those around me. I could feel the pulse of the world shifting, the desire for change longing to break free. Yet the battle loomed large ahead. I had to ask myself, how could I share this truth without shattering the delicate balance of my life? As the weight pressed down on my heart, I stood on the brink of revelation and realization, a point of no return, knowing fully well that once I moved forward, there would be no going back. It all happened so fast. One moment, I was driving home, the sun shining brightly through my windshield, and the next, everything went dark. The impact of the collision was jarring. The crunching metal, the shattered glass. Time seemed to suspend as I drifted into unconsciousness. In those fleeting seconds, I couldn't fathom that I was crossing into something beyond life, something profound. It wasn't just a car accident. It felt like a door opening to a realm I had never expected to encounter. As I surrendered to the void, I found myself in what felt like a grand courtroom, ethereal and luminous, where the atmosphere thrummed with an undeniable energy. Before me stood Jesus, radiating a love that pierced through to the very marrow of my being. I felt both comforted and utterly exposed in his presence. This wasn't just a dream. It was a revelation. I realized I was here to face the truths I had buried deep within. Truths about my life, my choices, and the spiritual war surrounding us all. The weight of the moment was immense. As he began to address me, I felt an overwhelming urge to listen, to absorb every word. What Jesus revealed shook the very foundation of my understanding. He spoke of a hidden agenda woven into the fabric of our society, orchestrated by the elite. It was a narrative so intricately spun that most people remained blissfully unaware of its existence. Deception runs rampant, Amir, he said, his voice echoing in the chambers of my mind. Many are led to believe they live in freedom, but the truth is that they are shackled by fear and ignorance. I could feel a palpable urgency in his tone. My heart raced as I processed his words. I saw flashes of the world. The wars battled not for justice, but for the continuation of power held by a few. The suffering of the innocent, the manipulation of technology to enforce control, and the deliberate sowing of division among communities painted a dire picture of reality. This wasn't merely a wake-up call. It was a devastating reminder of the stakes in this spiritual war. As Jesus continued to guide me through this otherworldly courtroom, I felt as if my very soul was exposed, each thought and belief laid bare before him. Revelations poured forth, illuminating the darkness that had clouded my understanding for so long. I witnessed leaders vowing to protect, yet secretly complicit in the machinations that bred suffering. I saw families torn apart by the lies that propagated endlessly, fed by a media machine driven by the highs of spectacle rather than the lows of truth. It was terrifying, yet within that terror there was a flicker of hope. Jesus spoke to me of an awakening, a potential for a collective rise against the ignorance that held many captive. With each revelation, I felt the tension in my heart grow. This was no longer just about me or my journey. It was about all of us. I envisioned my community, the faces of those I held dear, wrapped in layers of belief and tradition, unaware of the manipulation at play. How could I share what I had seen? The fear gripped me. Fear of casting aside the life I built. Fear of facing the backlash of a community steeped in misunderstanding. Yet, the call to action resonated within me like a drumbeat, demanding to be heard. I had tasted the truth, gazed into the dark abyss of deception, and came out alive, transformed. Just as that realization solidified in my heart, Jesus looked deeply into my eyes, his gaze penetrating to my very essence. "You have a choice to make, Amir," he said, an air of gravity enveloping us both. "Will you rise and share this truth, or choose silence in the face of a spiritual war that rages?" The words hung heavy in the air, igniting a storm of emotions within me. How could I walk back into my life, knowing what I knew? Would I risk everything to open the eyes of others, to call for an awakening that could save us from ourselves? It felt insurmountable, yet there was a flicker of determination rising within me. As I stood there, suspended between dimensions, I knew that my life would never be the same, and the real battle was only just beginning. Waking up from that near-death experience felt surreal, as if I had crossed a boundary I couldn't fully grasp. The hospital room was bright, voices buzzed in the background, and yet all I could focus on were the revelations I had received. But reality quickly set in, and I soon realized that the truth I carried within me was going to be a burden. When I returned home, the stark reality of my situation hit me like a ton of bricks. My family, my community, the very people I had grown up with, cherished and respected, looked at me with suspicion and fear. When I voiced the changes I had experienced, the insights I had gleaned during my time on the other side, I was met with harsh words and cold glares. They branded me a heretic, a betrayer of the faith I had once proudly upheld. The heaviness of their rejection hung over my heart like a dark cloud, intensifying my feelings of guilt and isolation. I had been thrown into the depths of a spiritual war, not only within myself but also against those I loved. I felt like I was living on the boundary between two worlds, unable to reconcile the teachings I had learned all my life with the profound truths Jesus had shown me. I wandered through my days, a ghost in my own life, filled with the electrifying love of the revelations but increasingly lonely. I sensed their fear, a fear deeply rooted in the deception that had been spoon-fed to them for generations. This war for souls was real, and the stakes were higher than anyone could imagine. In my solitude, I turned to secret exploration of the teachings of Jesus, silently reading the Gospels and reflecting on the messages of love, forgiveness, and awakening. As I read, I felt a fire ignite within me. Each word resonated, echoing truths that I had long sought but had never been adequately fulfilled by the doctrines I had embraced as a child. I began to understand the manipulation of the elite, the agendas that kept us divided, the wars that tore families apart, not just in the physical sense, but in spiritual and emotional ways. The more I delved into these teachings, the clearer it became that this wasn't merely about religion, but a call to awakening, a recognition that we are all connected in a shared human experience. Yet fear lingered in the periphery of my mind. How could I challenge these ingrained beliefs without betraying my family? Each skirmish with my thoughts became a microcosm of the larger spiritual war around us. I had been gifted a revelation, an understanding of truth that transcended any single religious identity, and yet I was terrified. Terrified of the consequences of awakening, terrified of facing the backlash from those I loved the most. As I read more about Jesus, his struggles, and his love for humanity, I sensed the depth of his sacrifice, a sacrifice that often went unappreciated and misunderstood. The weight of that realization crushed my chest. The ultimate truth was that the path to enlightenment often bore the scars of pain. Each day I carried the burden of my knowledge, oscillating between the desire to share what I had learned and the fear that held me captive. I wanted to stand up for the truth, to be that voice that encouraged my community to awaken, but the cost felt insurmountable. I felt the tension build within me like a simmering pot, threatening to boil over. The world around me was changing, and I sensed a growing urgency that mirrored the chaotic unrest outside my window. The societal divisions and manipulation continued to deepen, creating a rift that felt impossible to bridge. I was left in an agonizing limbo, knowing the profound implications of my experiences but unsure how to convey them without losing everything. As I stood on the precipice of decision, I felt Jesus' presence wrap around me, a reminder that I was not alone. My heart raced as I considered the risk of my next steps. Would I allow the fear of rejection to silence me? Or would I embrace the calling to ignite an awakening, even if that meant standing against the tide of disapproval? The inner conflict raged like a storm within, but deep down, I knew that the spiritual war was waging not just outside, but within. The truth needed to be spoken, and my role in this narrative was becoming clearer by the moment. And as I pondered over what to do next, I sensed that the real challenge was ahead, lurking just beyond my hesitation. After enduring the pain of rejection from my family and community, I found myself in a deep quest for truth. I knew I needed to understand what I had experienced, what the revelations meant not just for me, but for the world at large. Each day felt like a battle, a spiritual war waging within my soul. I felt compelled to explore the teachings of Jesus in a way I'd never done before. I didn't know where to start, but my heart guided me to the Bible. Its pages trembled with the potential to unlock the mysteries I desperately sought. I began to read, poring over scripture with an insatiable hunger, letting the words wash over me and spark a flicker of hope amidst the chaos of fear I was feeling. As I delved deeper, connections began to form. I scoured online forums and groups, seeking out others who, like me, had encountered spiritual awakenings. As I engaged with these individuals, stories unfolded that mirrored my own. People who felt lost and alone before finding purpose in their newfound understanding. They spoke of their encounters with Jesus, moments that shifted their perception completely. It was comforting to find this community. Suddenly, I wasn't alone. Together we shared not just our stories, but a collective sense of urgency to challenge the hidden agendas that plague our world. Each revelation felt like a piece of a larger puzzle that was now coming together. With every interaction, I felt my fears begin to dissipate. I was uncovering truths that cut through the deception designed to keep us in line, obedient to the whims of the elite. The stories I heard were like haunting echoes, reminding me of the struggles we all face, the wars that ravage nations, the manipulation of technology that draws us further apart, and the calculated efforts to keep us from awakening to our true potential. Each conversation served as confirmation that the spiritual war we fight isn't just personal, it's collectively woven into our society. I realized that my experience wasn't isolated, but was part of a bigger narrative that spanned generations and cultures. The deeper I went, the more clarity I gained. I studied the teachings of Jesus, not just his words, but the actions that defined his mission. I saw parallels between his confrontations with the ruling class of his time and the struggles we face today against corruption and manipulation. It lit a fire within me, compelling me to reflect on my own past. I had been a judge, someone who upheld the law, but was I also complicit in the deception that permeated our systems? This was difficult to grapple with, the conflict between my role and the realization that those very systems were often designed to keep us from seeking the truth. I couldn't ignore the urgency of this awakening any longer. It was time to confront the discomfort and allow it to propel me into action. But I wrestled with anxiety. How would my family react if they saw this transformation taking place within me? What if they regarded me with even more disdain? Those fears weighed heavily on my spirit. as I grappled with the possible sacrifice of familial ties. But as I studied the lives of others who had faced similar trials, I found a sense of peace. Their stories illustrated how, despite the cost, embracing the truth brought an unmatched liberation. I understood then that awakening sometimes requires shedding old identities, even those wrapped in love and familiarity. Turning away from the deception that held my community captive felt like an act of rebellion, but it was also an act of love. I began to believe that for every singed soul that came to light, the collective consciousness would shift, opening pathways for others to do the same. With every passing day, I felt the tension rise within me. I stood at a crossroads of faith and fear, but the truth I had encountered sparked an undeniable courage. I wanted to share what I had learned, to inspire others to wake up from the slumber that life had put them in. My heart raced as I envisioned speaking out against the forces that manipulated us, uniting those in search of liberation from the chains of deception. I felt the echoes of Jesus' teachings urging me forth, but I couldn't shake the questions. What would it look like to step into this space? How would I even begin to confront the darkness around me? Understanding that the path forward was fraught with challenges sobered me, yet the urgent need for awakening lingered in the air like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. In the days that followed my revelations, a sense of urgency washed over me, deeper than anything I had ever experienced. I felt a stirring within, a conviction that my near-death experience was not just a personal awakening but a divine call. How could I remain silent when so much was at stake? The spiritual war one had glimpsed during my encounter with Jesus was unfolding right before our eyes, and every moment I hesitated felt like a betrayal to those still caught in the cycles of deception. I realized that I had been given a gift, a truth that couldn't remain hidden. I understood now that this journey was about breaking free from the shackles of fear and sharing the message that Jesus had entrusted to me. It was terrifying to consider stepping out of the shadows of my silence. I remembered the hurtful words hurled at me by my family and friends, the disdain in their eyes when I tried to explain what I had seen and felt. But in those moments, I also recalled how Jesus faced rejection himself, how he stood firm in the truth despite the opposition he encountered. That steadfastness echoed in my heart. The revelations I had received during my near-death experience painted a picture of a world manipulated by an elite few, and I could see the ramifications of their hidden agenda playing out in every aspect of our lives. Wars fueled by greed, social divisions designed to keep us at each other's throats. These were weapons in the spiritual war we all found ourselves engaged in. I began to write my thoughts down, a process that felt both cathartic and daunting. My words were filled with a mix of fear and hope as I poured out everything I had learned. Each sentence became a step toward liberation, a way to confront the deception that has ensnared so many. I highlighted stories of those oppressed by technology, stripped of their agency while the elite profit off their labor. I dissected the false narratives pushed by media, designed to erect invisible walls between us so that we wouldn't realize we're all in this together. I sensed an awakening beyond just myself. There was an entire generation yearning for truth, for genuine understanding, and I felt an undeniable responsibility to lead them in this quest. If only I could muster the courage to speak. However, the anxiety remained as a constant companion. I felt the weight of my community's expectations bearing down on me. What if I lost my job as a judge? What if my family turned their backs on me entirely? Yet, in the depths of that fear, I uncovered a profound realization. The battle wasn't just for my life, it was for the very souls of those still asleep, trapped in a matrix of manipulation. The stakes were high. As I stepped outside my comfort zone, I wanted to shake my community awake. The truths that Jesus had shown me were desperately needed by those who couldn't see beyond their immediate lives. I envisioned standing before them, sharing not just my experience, but the collective awakening that can occur when we confront the hidden agendas at play. On this journey, I sought mentorship from others who had walked similar paths. I joined discussion groups where we explored our shared experiences and discussed our fears openly. There was something powerful about those gatherings. It felt like a sanctuary where the spirit of awakening was nurtured. The stories shared were not just personal, they were emblematic of a greater truth that extended beyond our individual narratives. As we opened ourselves to one another, the courage within me began to rise. I realized each account was a thread, weaving a tapestry of hope that could embolden others to seek their own truth. The awakening wasn't a solo endeavor, it was a communal journey. The need to break the silence that held us captive could only be achieved when we united in purpose. Yet every step I took toward this newfound purpose was met with resistance, both externally and internally. I oscillated between hope and fear, wondering if I was doing the right thing. The images of Jesus, full of love yet firm in his mission, reminded me that every significant change is met with opposition. All the fears that plagued me, disapproval, abandonment, rejection, began to transform into a source of determination. I couldn't ignore the spiritual war that demanded action. I had a transformational experience that could awaken others, and it felt selfish to keep that confined to my heart. With this realization, the question resounded louder than ever. Would I step forward, confront the deception, and risk everything for the truth that sets us free? The battle transcended my fears, propelling me toward an irrevocable decision. With the resolve to embrace my new calling, I took a bold step that would change everything. I left my home, stepping into the vast desert just beyond my town, a space that felt symbolic of my departure from the life I once knew. The sun blazed overhead, and each step into the dry earth felt weighted by the significance of what I was leaving behind. No longer would I be the silent observer, shackled by the fear of rejection. I felt a profound sense of liberation as I walked, a physical manifestation of the spiritual war that had waged within me. In many ways, the desert represented both the isolation I faced and the clarity I sought in sharing the truth that had been revealed to me. As I wandered, I contemplated the messages I had learned during my near-death experience. Jesus had entrusted me with a revelation, a truth about the hidden agendas at play in our society and the elite's manipulative grip on our lives. I could feel the urgency coursing through my veins, driving me to awaken others and guide them out of the darkness. I recognized that the struggles of my upbringing had prepared me for this moment. Those fears, those doubts, this was the battleground of belief versus deception. The reality I had encountered showed me that every soul mattered in this spiritual war, and I was determined to play my part. Each day, I found spots in the desert where I felt the presence of God most strongly. I would pause to pray, to meditate, and to seek guidance. I envisioned standing before groups of people, sharing the beautiful message of awakening that Jesus had imparted to me. It wasn't just about religion. It was about truth, embracing love, despite the darkness that surrounded us. I would speak of our interconnectedness, the narrative that we are all a part of the same struggle against a society that often seems determined to keep us divided. In the solitude of the desert, I reaffirmed my mission to evangelize, to be a lighthouse, guiding others through the swirling fog of confusion and fear. The world outside was in turmoil, wars being fought in distant lands, divisive rhetoric echoing through the streets, and the implications of technology increasingly leading us astray. I remained acutely aware of how these larger battles intertwined with the personal struggles of the people I had left behind. My heart ached for them, for the confusion and deception they faced, and I knew I had to reach them. But the risks weighed heavily upon me, striking fear deep within. I could already imagine the backlash from my community, the wrath that would surely fall upon those who dared to speak against the prevailing narrative. Yet I held on to the conviction that the truth I carried was far more potent than the fear that threatened to silence me. As I engaged with others during my time in the desert, I felt a kinship with those seeking answers, those who had experienced their own awakenings. Each encounter validated my journey. Sharing stories of our struggles and how we were silenced reinforced my resolve. I realized these conversations were not just enlightening. They were acts of resistance against a world that sought to stifle the light within us. The tears, the laughter, the shared recognition of our plight, all these moments illuminated the path forward. Together, we began forming a community, one grounded in the truth and committed to confronting the hidden agendas that govern our lives. Each day brought new challenges. The desert sun scorching down on me, the criticism waiting just beyond the horizon, but it also brought new strength. The world may have been filled with chaos, but through our collective efforts, we could ignite a flame of hope in others. As I shared my story, every word resonated with the truth I had unearthed. And with every moment, I felt a command press further into my spirit. This awakening was not just a personal journey, it was a movement, a call to action that needed to echo far beyond my presence in the desert. The fear still lingered, but the conviction to break the silence grew ever stronger, fueling the desire to reach out despite the risks involved. Each step I took felt imbued with newfound purpose, and I realized that this was just the beginning of a much larger fight for the truth. Years have passed since I set out into the desert, and in that time, my journey has led me to a new community, one that feels like a family I never expected to find. I've become a mentor and a witness to the revelations that transformed my life. Among these remarkable individuals, I discovered people who, like me, once felt alone in their quest for truth. We gather in spaces where honesty thrives, sharing stories of spiritual awakenings and seeking to understand the larger implications of the hidden agendas that suffocate our society. I often remember the struggles I faced when attempting to share what I had seen, the refusal from my community that stung like salt in a wound. Now, I'm grateful to play a part in helping others step out of the shadows of deception, igniting their own personal awakenings. Through these interactions, I've come to understand that this is not just about individual transformations. It's about collective healing. When people share their stories of rejection, doubt, and confusion, I see the threads of a larger narrative. The spiritual war we face is not fought in isolation. It's a communal struggle against a society rife with manipulation. Together, we're bravely confronting these truths. I often reflect on my encounter with Jesus and the revelations he bestowed upon me. Insights into the geopolitical manipulation woven into our lives by the elite, how wars are perpetuated not for righteousness but to sustain control. In sharing these insights with my community, I see a flicker of recognition in their eyes, the recognition that we can reclaim our power. One of the most fulfilling aspects of my journey has been witnessing the change ripple through my previous community. While many in that town initially shunned me, over time, some began to question their own beliefs. I was invited back to speak, tentatively at first, like we were testing the waters. The spiritual awakening I experienced resonates beyond my confidence. It speaks to a universal need for truth. As I stood before them, sharing both my personal journey and the revelations, I could sense the tension in the air, the apprehension mixed with curiosity. There were still those who clung to tradition, but slowly, the seeds of doubt began to creep into their minds as I implored them to seek beyond the confines of their past teachings. Yet a heavy burden remained in my heart, the longing for reconciliation with my family. Despite my new community's warmth, I couldn't shake the feeling of loss that accompanied my departure from them. The chasm felt immense at times. I still remember family gatherings that felt whole, filled with laughter and love. Now, it seemed only a ghost of what it used to be. I learned that forgiveness can be as much a part of the awakening journey as the truth itself. Each day, I pray for the chance to bridge that divide, knowing that the reconciliation between my past and present is integral to my healing. If the truths I espouse have the potential to awaken others, surely they can reach my family one day. As I guide others on their pathways to enlightenment, I encourage them to examine their own fears and doubts. I emphasize that every hesitation is a reflection of the greater spiritual war we must confront. Technology can be a tool for our empowerment, but in the hands of the elite, it can also oppress. I remind them that our collective consciousness holds immense power. We can dismantle the narratives that divide us. The awakening we are stirring isn't merely about individual transformations. It is an assertion of our shared humanity. The more we awaken, the more we can push back against the forces that seek to manipulate us. I see it as a wave gaining momentum, gaining traction among those who start daring to ask questions, who refuse to remain passive and compliant. In that light, I strive to be a beacon of hope amidst a world filled with uncertainty and fear. I want to inspire others to step into their own truths, to recognize the deceptions laden across our daily lives and push back against them. Often I encounter others who, like I once did, fear the repercussions of speaking their truths. I share my own fears and the pushback I confronted, making it clear that while the path isn't always easy, it's always worth it. The potential for awakening is boundless, and I believe with each individual's transformation, we are collectively erasing the lines that divide us. The promise of reconciliation glimmers on the horizon, and I hold on tightly to that hope. In my life, I had always felt the weight of expectations, demands from my family, my community, and my position as a judge. I lived by the systems that defined my existence, bound by the rules and regulations, constantly adhering to the moral codes instilled in me since childhood. But everything changed the day I nearly lost my life in a car accident. In that moment, I found myself face to face with Jesus, and my understanding of truth shifted dramatically. He revealed to me the shackles we often accept as normal, the religious systems that can suffocate rather than liberate. What I learned was that the awakening to truth often requires tearing down these barriers, even if the journey is fraught with pain. The experience of meeting Jesus was profound. It was far from anything I had anticipated. He showed me the hidden agendas at play in our world, orchestrated by the elite who thrive on division and deception. I was granted glimpses of the spiritual war that rages around us. Wars fought not merely in distant lands, but within our hearts and minds. The realization struck me. We have been conditioned to accept a reality dictated by those in power, blinded by what we think is truth. Awakening demands that we confront this manipulation and seek the deeper truths that lie beneath the surface. As I returned to my life, the truths I bore felt like a double-edged sword. On one hand, I had been blessed with wisdom. On the other, that very wisdom isolated me from those I once called family. They saw my shift not as an awakening, but as a betrayal of everything I was taught. I remember the stares of confusion and anger when I tried to explain my revelations, the refusal to entertain the possibility that I was awakening to something profound. It became painfully clear that the systems intended to guide us often bind instead, a lesson I now understand deeply. I grasped that the spiritual journey toward liberation is laden with hurdles. However, each challenge only affirms the necessity of the path. In this reflection on my journey, I realized that sharing my experience wasn't about imposing my beliefs on others. It was about fostering conversations that encourage awakening. I began gathering a small group, seeking those who felt the same urgency for truth. Slowly, we became like-minded souls, encouraging each other to dive deep into the teachings of Jesus. As we explored Scripture and spoke of our encounters, our discussions illuminated the layers of deception that permeate our society. The struggles we faced weren't isolated incidents. They were interwoven in the fabric of the spiritual war that we are all a part of. We learned that every individual's truth adds to the collective consciousness, shaping our trajectory toward a more liberated existence. Still, the fear of backlash lingered for me. I found myself torn between my desire to share these teachings and the very real consequences of my outspokenness. I wanted to confront the hidden agendas that kept my community in darkness, yet I was aware that doing so could alienate me further from my loved ones. The tension around me mounted as the world around us seemed to spiral deeper into chaos, leaders exploiting fear for control, technology used as a tool for division rather than connection. I recognize this as a significant moment not just for myself but for humanity. It was time to choose whether I would stand by and watch or actively engage in the fight for truth, love, and unity amid division. I took a deep breath, feeling the spirit of awakening pulse through my veins, urging me forward. This was about more than just my journey. It was a call to action for everyone willing to listen and reflect on their own lives. As I gathered my resolve, I finally understood what it meant to be a witness to truth. I had to speak, no matter the outcome. Looking to the future, I realized that each of us carries the potential to spark change, to encourage others to question the narratives we have long accepted. This was not just a personal confrontation with my beliefs. It was a collective struggle that required all of us. And so, I prepared to step into that light, knowing that each step would lead us closer to the truth we have all been searching for. As I stand here, reflecting on the journey from my near-death experience to this moment, I must ask you something profound. Have you ever felt the pull of a truth that transcends your understanding? A whisper that urges you to confront the hidden agendas that shape our reality? Because I can assure you, there is more at play in our lives than we might realize. A spiritual war that strands us between fear and awakening, demanding our attention and action. What I witnessed in that sacred encounter with Jesus revealed a world entwined in deception, where the elite thrive on division, while our collective humanity yearns for unity. My experience was not just for me. It was an invitation for all of us to rise, to seek out the light amidst the shadows. We are all part of this cosmic battle, intertwined in a narrative that requires our active engagement. The stakes have never been higher, and the need for awakening is more urgent than ever. Now, I want to hear your voice. Have you felt a flicker of truth in your own life? A moment that compelled you to question everything you believed? Share it with me in the comments below. Your story is not just yours. It resonates with others walking a similar path of discovery. You are not alone in this quest for enlightenment, and together we can shed light on the darkness that seeks to envelop us. If this message speaks to you, don't hesitate to subscribe to Truth from Beyond and hit that notification bell. Our journey is just beginning, and we will unravel even more truths in the videos to come that will inspire and challenge the very fabric of your beliefs. The awakening is a community effort, and each subscription strengthens our collective voice against the tides of deception. As we navigate this challenging yet transformative journey together, I want to leave you with one last thought. The truth, while often uncomfortable, is the path to liberation. Embrace it, share it, and let it guide you. And remember, every soul touched by the light brings us closer to unity. I am Amir, and it has been an honor to share this moment with you. Until next time, stay brave, stay curious, and keep seeking.